Sylvia, so excited to have you here today. And I don't know if you noticed, but where we normally start is we get the guests to tell us a little bit about themselves before we dive in further. And you have a really unique story in terms of, and Elise, I don't know if you saw this in when you and I were chatting, but the book that she wrote and the experience she had, I'm super excited to dive into it. But can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Sylvia, just before we kick things off for those that may be discovering you for the first time today?
Sure. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, good afternoon in my time.
It's morning for Sylvia, afternoon for Elise.
Where are you?
I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Oh, you're in the States.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Awesome. I used to live in San Francisco on the corner of Fulton and Stanton, right by Golden Gate Park.
Unbelievable. Yeah, that's a great area. I'm just north of the Golden Gate Bridge.
Oh, beautiful.
So, yeah, it's gorgeous here today. So, yeah, fall's my favorite one. Well, it's hard to pick, but it's always beautiful in the fall. But it's beautiful all over the world, just about in the fall, in my experience.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I'm a writer, and I don't know. Well, I can even just show you here. Here's the book, Two Breaths, One Step, and it's an adventure memoir. A fabulous experience hiking over 500 miles across the Himalayas, up to over 18,000 feet. It was an adventure I took years ago, and I was motivated to write about it a couple years ago. The book was recently published. It's filled with amazing stories through a very captivating landscape, breathtakingly beautiful. There's pictures in there, 16 pages of full color photos. And it's got a number of themes woven through it in terms of, it's a quick read, but it's a day-to-day hiking adventure, and underneath it, it's got the theme of the Buddhist culture, which is extremely prominent in that area of the world, and some just many different threads woven together, and it's a fun book.
Awesome.
Okay, so I just want to set the scene. So how long ago, what age were you when you took this journey?
Right. Good question. So I had my 29th birthday on this journey, and it was in the mid 80s. And as we all know, the world was a very different place in the mid 80s. So, you're not having your cell phone with you. And
I know. My friends and I hitchhiked, and I keep in touch with her. We've been friends since we've been 15. We hitchhiked through Europe, and we're like, how did we even do that? Like, we were like, we'll meet you here. I'll meet you in Marseille. I'll meet you on Crete. Like, how did we even find each other?
And let alone, you just showed up and found a place to stay. And yeah, I mean, things worked, and in some ways it was a lot less complicated.
I guess so. It did work. I remember the adventures being amazing, but you're right. And it was the end of the 80s, early 90s, same time, no cell phones. And we ended up meeting up and finding each other and having the adventure and finding the youth hostel to stay in. And
that's it. Yeah, the great youth hostels. Yeah, this was extremely remote, and I remember it really hit me about 10 days into my hiking. I was in and you got to understand, and this is the mid 80s. At that time, Nepal, which is the country I was doing the hiking in, had the fewest roads of any country in the world per capita. And so what you did is you just hopped on the local bus and you took it as far as it went. And then you got off and you started walking. Everybody walks if you want to go somewhere. Mm-hmm. And months later, when I came back that way, they'd added one more mile to the road.
Did you go alone on this journey?
Well, you have to read the book. Technically, I was with 3 other people, and then Sherpas. You just don't go by yourself.
Right.
Completely different hiking experience than here. But for all practical purposes, I was alone because these people were rarely in my sight. I mean, I tried to prepare for this trip, but just to give you an idea, there's a saying that when you hike to, for example, Everest Base Camp, which is 18,000 feet, you have to actually climb 25,000 feet and descend 35,000. In other words, the terrain is like this. It's not like the Sierras or the Appalachians on the East Coast, where you pretty much go up one side, there's a crust, and you go down the other. The mountain ranges in the United States are very linear. They're very north-south oriented. And where I'm at, one of my favorite places in the world is hiking the Eastern Sierras, and you can get up to the crest and stand there and look out east, and you can look out west. Well, the Himalayas are nothing like that. You get up and you just see this unending sea of mountains, many over 26,000 feet. So I was constantly exhausted. But anyway, I just was not, I mean, I thought I was in good shape. But anyway, they were always miles ahead of me, which is why there's a moving passage in the book, and also in my story, which is the Mountains, My Teacher, which is in the book being published this winter, that I got lost in a blizzard at 16,000 feet because I was alone and it was freezing and I couldn't see anything. And that was a horrendous experience in the book. So technically I was with others, but I always kind of say I was alone because I was always the last one, straggling into camp. And half the time I was so exhausted, I just went to bed and couldn't even eat. And then you hit the replay button the next day. But for those of you that are not backpackers, I mean, there's a certain element in the mundane where you're just thinking about putting one foot in front of the other and, what you're going to do for water and dinner. And I mean, it's really fantastic. You are not worried about all these existential things that some people like myself might be thinking about on a day-to-day, in your home.
Yeah. I mean, I always think that I like hiking and I've joined like meetup hiking groups, and then we get there and I'm like, you know what? The idea of this is way better than the thing itself for me.
When I do my
I'm like, thank God the brewery's at the end of this 12-mile hike.
When I do my talks around the country, I always say, just, you can enjoy this wonderful adventure and you don't even have to put your hiking boots on. You can just
read my book.
Exactly,
it's like you're there.
Exactly. I can't tell you how many people, I was at this one event and this woman came up to me after, and, people ask very kind of day to day, like, what'd you do for food or what did you eat? And she had just returned from hiking like hut to hut in Italy. And so she was asking me about food, and she was telling me how, she'd get into these little huts in Italy. I just came back from a couple of weeks hiking in northern Italy in the Dolomites, and the Italians decide what hike to do based on the menu.
Okay, well, I could do that. I would totally do that.
And we don't even have huts here at food, let alone coffee. Well, they have like gourmet food.
Okay,
and so she was telling me she'd, roll in and, it is like cheese platters and tiramisu. And I'm like, you definitely do not want to do what I did.
I want to find out what hike that was. That sounds like my kind of hike. I'll hike from house to house and eat at their dining room table with them outside in their vineyard. Yeah,
I'm older now, but I could have stayed easily 3 times as long. I'd go there in a heartbeat. It was fantastic.
So where did you wait? So you just came back?
Yeah, I did just a couple months ago. It was fantastic. I was apparently the first airplane American going there, and they didn't have any booked for the rest of the summer. This was end of June, 1st of July. And it was like a fantasy land.
Okay. Well, I'm going to reach out and I'd like to learn more because I definitely, if I'm going to hike and do something and I like that it's a different way of experiencing a different culture and environment, right? Like how many people go on a hike from like house to house and, with families.
Yeah, it's very different. I must, hands down, they're far more sophisticated than we are.
That's amazing.
But that's the other end of the spectrum. So, you can go anywhere in between. And I'm frankly, it was an amazing adventure. I wouldn't trade it for the world, but it was, it was very difficult, but it was breathtakingly beautiful. And I'm someone that is one of my main themes in my life has always been beauty. It's what motivates me. It's what inspires me. The other being truth. And those two values are, you can find them anywhere, but the Himalayas have this, just this incredible tradition and really a mystique about them. I mean, they're mountains, but they're like the mother mountain.
Is it something that as a kid you were intrigued by because you read something in a book or saw a movie, or like, it's not like, don't always hear, I went and hiked the Himalayas.
Right. I talk about this a little bit in the book. For whatever reason, I don't know if everyone's like this, but for me, words speak to me. And I've always loved geography. And I grew up in our home, we often had people coming and going from around the world. And my mother was just passionate about travel, even though she had 5 kids and was not globetrotting around the world. But that's probably what kept her alive in terms of her imagination. But I just, so anyway, words just speak to me. And, gosh, somewhere back there in my early 20s, I heard, well, actually in the 70s, the kind of hippie trip was to go from Istanbul to Kathmandu or Afghanistan. That was, as I said, I was more like 29. The name Kathmandu just, places just speak to me. Like when I was actually hiking, there's a place, and remember this is the mid 80s, there was a place called Gokyo. Now I knew nothing about this place other than seeing it on a map, but it just spoke to me. And I just told the guide one day, I'm going over there, and that was going to require a detour of a couple of weeks. And I was just going to go on my own because it wasn't part of our plan. But anyway, I guess what I'm just saying is places just speak to me. And as I said, the Himalayas, well, the mountains have always, I'm a mountain gal. I mean, I love the coast, but I breathe, my breathing just excels when I'm above 10,000 feet.
Wow.
I always say I could be blindfolded and I would know when I pass 10,000 feet. The air is just
Hey,
different.
Marnie.
What?
We have a question. If you'd be up,
Yeah.
I think she's in St. Croix. If I remember correctly.
Oh, hey, my friend Marnie. Marnie's a fellow writer. Yes, I'm going to spend some time with her in late November, of course. Although
is that in St. Croix?
Yeah, in St. Croix. Although I'm not. I'm a mountain gal, and I'm not a super humid person with high humidity. But hey, I love exploring. So anything's, I'm game for anything.
Maybe we'll meet there. I've just got a message from a friend who's actually a tugboat captain over in St. Croix and has been for years, Ingo Schluter. So I'm not sure, Marnie, if you know him. And we've been friends forever. And I lived in the Caribbean for years in the British and U.S. Virgin Islands as a private charter chef. And I sailed the leewards and all over after, long story, but after being paralyzed with an autoimmune disease, I decided to start taking the journey of life. And so the Caribbean is amazing, but I would never think to hike on the island.
Well, I mean, I haven't been there, but Marty could tell. I mean, like Hawaii, there's fantastic hiking. I've never been to the Caribbean, but nowhere near St. Croix.
St. Croix is a much bigger island than the smaller islands. So there's probably a lot more terrain and a lot more to see and a lot more to do for sure.
I met Marty on a fantastic adventure skiing in Utah for several years.
Wow.
But anyway, thank you for joining us.
Marnie.
Well, I mean, there's such a great lesson in all of this when we talk about what we were talking about earlier about living in the moment. It seems clearly you understand the power of now, especially when you're on and I mean, like you said, your day-to-day life might be a bit different, but when you're on these journeys, and you talked about I'm thinking about, well, what am I going to eat later? Like even if that's later, you're still in the minute because we're only talking a little bit later, and you're actually thinking about it now. Like, okay, what do I plan for that? So it feels like you're truly living in the now when you go on these adventures. Is that a safe assessment?
Yeah, you have that perfectly. And it's actually why I love sports so much. Like I'm a passionate skier, and frankly, I don't do well with just I'm not a kind of person that's going to just hang on a beach all day. Frankly, I'd find that very stressful. I do much better when my mind's occupied. So it is not available to go off and, as I always say, it's like your mind's like the puppy. It's always running off and it's not in the present. So that's why I love skiing, because the moment I'm not present, I fall flat on my face. So it just constantly brings me back. And, triathlon does that. And it also, for whatever reason, the way I'm wired, it just helps me understand my world, my place in the world. And I can just see so much clearer. It just really, it helps. And it helps me to understand my world.
I hear you, girl. I always say my home to me is when I'm out on the road. when I'm experiencing, new things and new places. That's where I feel at home. Having a nice home, having a beautiful retreat, living in the Weeki Wachee in the beautiful springs is beautiful, but I'm on a month-long journey right now in my RV, traveling, visiting friends and family. I don't need to be on a mountaintop. I could be driveway surfing, which is my favorite thing to do, but I have a new e-bike and I get to travel into the towns and I go into the neighborhoods, and to me, that's home. Like, it's amazing. So you're a little bit more extreme in your journey. I don't know if I would take off to the Himalayas. But there is something refreshing and freeing, and I feeling safe. I don't know if you feel the same way, but there's a safety that I feel when I'm out in the world.
Yeah. And, I just heard an interview I'm going to do an interview with Rick Steves. Anyway, I just heard Rick Steves do an interview with the New Yorker, and people were asking him about he lives in a small town, and he expressed exactly what I've always felt, that I'm very stable when I'm at home, and it's very helpful for me to have a rootedness, and that's how I grew up with that. But that gives me the psychic space and availability to go wander wherever, because some people can just wander endlessly, but I do need a sense of rootedness I really thrive on that sense of rootedness in a community. So yes, I love going out like you're doing, but my creativity is nurtured by having a kind of a place to retreat back to.
Oh, well, yeah, we have a retreat that we retreat back to that we started in Weeki Wachee, Florida. So it's there. So it is nice, yes, to have that base, someplace to pull into and be grounded. Although I find the creativity comes from being in the world. Like, to me, that is that place. And it doesn't even feel like wandering. It just feels like home.
You're absolutely right. And that's certainly where my ideas come from. To generate, I also have a career as a fine artist, a painter. And I thrive on having a place to develop the project, so to speak. But the idea, for example, of this book, Two Breaths, One Step, I mean, frankly, it was an incredible gift. I didn't just go, I'm just going to sit down and write about this experience I had 30 years ago. I was actually very fortunate and got to spend a month hiking in Patagonia, which is an amazing area of the world. Now, the mountains there, they're not near the height of the Himalayas, but they're very, very striking. And I don't know if it was just the routine of hiking every day and the air and the smells. I found myself thinking a lot about the Himalayas, which, I don't think about on a daily basis.
Right.
And I just was so inspired, and I just started writing, and I was not thinking about a book. It's a skill I transferred over from painting. When I'm in the studio, I am definitely not thinking about what gallery this painting's going to and who's going to purchase it or where it's going. I'm not thinking at all about that. And when I was writing, I was not thinking about a book or any of that, because I knew it would just kill my project. I just started writing, and next thing I knew, I had a book, and it was like, wow. But it was really grace, is what I say. But anyway, the idea came to me, just like you said, when I'm out. And that's when I do not have my best ideas sitting at the desk.
I know, right? Now, is that painting behind you something that is that your work behind you?
This is a painting from a long time ago. Yes. This is a map of the world I have.
I was going to be like, yeah.
I know you can't see it very well, but there's little pins. Well, there's pins for every place I went. And then there's pins placed in certain areas. And then I have like an old fashioned Polaroid camera of me with, a gorilla in Uganda or whatever it is.
Oh, nice.
And yeah. So they're just, it makes the map come alive. And I also have another career working with students, and my life's all about learning, which is what I don't like being bored. As I say, I'm a really good
joy of learning behind you.
Yeah. I'm a really good skier, but I love having a coach, because, there's always more to learn, and I just always want to be learning more. Otherwise I just would get bored. So, people, anyway. Yeah. So it's I love adventures, and, yeah, I love
So you
the
said you were
mountains.
going to be on the podcast and speaking, and so is it the story that you tell as like when if I was to come to see you on stage, what would I expect? Like what stories would you share or motivation?
Well, when the book came out, I did, gosh, over 30 appearances at a lot of them out west. I'm not sure if they're back east or not. We have an outdoor store called REI, at least.
Oh yeah, a
Yeah.
sports store.
Yeah. Is that in the East Coast?
Well, I travel in RV a lot. I don't know where I saw it, but they're all, I've seen them all over REIs.
Anyway, I did presentations at all 11 of the Bay Area REIs, and then I was also in Colorado, Oregon, and Washington. So those were particular book events when my book came out, and actually, it's in great company, I think. And it debuted at one of the most well-known bookstores in the country near where I live. And it's where, like if the president writes a book, that's where they speak. So I remember the day I was going to be there, Michelle Obama's book had just come out and I loved it. On the counter, there was my book, I was speaking, and her book was right next to it.
How awesome is that?
It was good. I sent a picture to my publisher and said, hey, I'm in real good company. And the same thing happened when Tom Hanks wrote his book of short stories. It just came out when he grew up fairly near here. And the local bookstore in the town he grew up in had it featured right there. And I was speaking there. And it was right there on the shelf next to him. So I kind of got a kick out of that. But anyway, so I usually do a very short reading from the book. And well, to begin with, I really like to engage the audience. So I always ask first if someone's been there. And if so, was it last year or was it 30 years ago? And I find out if anyone's interested in writing, if they're interested in any spiritual traditions, or if they're interested in the arts. So I try and understand who my audience is. And then I read a short excerpt, and I just talk about a variety of some of the adventures, whether it was getting lost in the blizzard or whether it was meeting a lama in a very remote monastery. And then I always have questions and answers, which are just fascinating. Like the one I mentioned where the gala just returned from hiking in Italy with fantastic food. And I said she might not want the kind of trip I did unless she went with a tour company that was real exclusive and they do everything for you. I mean, it's a different world today, so you can definitely do that.
Right.
I mean, also like when I did my adventure, I had or when I do these presentations, I have a fantastic slideshow. And one of the slides is the highest place where you could actually, let's say, set up a tent. I actually walked higher, but it was at this, I think 17,500 or something. But anyway, it was just, I set up a tent, and someone told me today there is a hotel there. And I'm like, wow, okay. So,
Right.
And also there was there's actually 2 treks I did that the first one, I had no intention of doing the second one, but the day I finished, the day I was about to leave, let's see, this was the Prime Minister, Indira Gandhi, was shot in India. It was kind of like 9/11 in the sense that no one was going anywhere. All airports, bus, everything was closed. So I just figured, what the heck, I'll go out again. So I went out for another month. But
not just like another 5-hour trek, it was another month.
Yeah. Well, you can't just really, that's what I mean. There's no, I guess you could have walked 2.5 hours and 2.5 hours back, but you had to walk everywhere. So yeah, it was to the mountain range in the western part of the country. But the point being, I in the research for this book, they had just completed, I believe in 2017 or maybe it was 18, they completed the road, the highway around this entire range of mountains, which I suppose is a huge feat for the local people rather than walking for a month. But what that meant is that there were only like 4 days of this, at least minimum 3-week, if not 4-week trek where you're not within sight of a road, which is a vastly, vastly different experience. So, there's certainly remote areas. And in fact, I had a great privilege right before COVID broke out I had an opportunity to go to Tibet. And as I say, I got to see all my old friends, meaning all my buddies that are over 26,000 feet, the mountain range. And of course, they're still there. And I got to wave to all of them. And it was a very different experience, though, because I was coming in. I was not hiking for months. I was coming in through the north into Everest, which is on the Chinese side. But it was great. In fact, that was a fantastic story, because I thought, I could easily get sick. Altitude sickness is a real concern. I was at 17,500. And from my understanding, it really doesn't have much to do at all with your physical condition. I mean, you could go once and be fine, and the next time you could get very ill. So, I didn't know how my body was going to react. I hoped it'd be fine, but, I'm older. So I remember the last little village we were in, I had a guide, and he said, you need to go in and get 2 bottles of oxygen, which, of course, in the mid-'80s, they did not have. And I said, really? Do we really need to do this? We're at the average elevation in Tibet is 14,000, the average. So we're probably at 15 now. And so he sends us into the store to buy the oxygen, and I get my 2 bottles, and I just become more and more alive the higher I go. So I was with a small group of friends, and we finally get to where we're going, and it was really late in the season. So the little tea house that was run by the monastery across the path was already closed down and everything, but we could boil water. Anyway, so we get there, and I'm just having the time of my life, and I just think it's fantastic. Well, everyone else is just so miserable. They can't sleep. They're sick to their stomach. They have headaches, and they're dying to get out of there. And I'm just like, are you kidding? Can we stay longer? Because we weren't up there very long that night and the next morning. And then I just left, and I gave my oxygen to the guide and said, you can donate this to someone else, because I hadn't opened it where everyone else didn't have any left. But, I was lucky, I guess, or, it's not that I was any different or better than them. It's just, I just was thriving. My sister says I must have been a Sherpa in my last life.
Could be.
So I'd love to ask you, Sylvia, as we start to wind down, what would you say is maybe your, I'm going to say, best life lesson or two that you learned personally from these treks and from all these adventures? Like, is there something that stands out, 1 or 2 life lessons you learned during these journeys?
Sure. I don't know if somewhere you're going to put a plug in that people wrote a story in this book, because that's what my story in the book is about, that's going to be published in a couple months or something.
Yeah.
And it's called, the story is The Mountain's My Teacher. And I think 2 things come to mind, and I talk about this in the story. It's an overused word today, and it's hard to make sense of this unless you've been somewhere like this, but it's really the sense of gratitude. I mean, on several levels. One is just materially. I mean, I came home, and I talk about this in the story. I mean, going into the grocery store was an incredibly disorienting experience, just from the sheer volume of amount of food that was available to me and everything else. And or whether it was just, going to the kitchen sink and being able to drink a glass of water, which today most of the world's population cannot do. We still cannot do. Or turning on a light. I remember, and it just depends on your orientation. I remember when I came back, an acquaintance of mine was just about to leave for a year in India and Nepal. And he was so excited, and I was so excited because I just returned. And it was so interesting. 30 days later, I'm walking around. I was in a small town then, and I see him. And I'm like, what? I thought you left. And he goes, yeah, I did. And I said, but you were going to go for a year. And he goes, I couldn't stand it. I came home. And I'm like, what do you mean? Because I just was like so, up here. I was like in nirvana. I was just, and he said, well, gosh, there's, and this is in the mid 80s, but he goes, there was just trash everywhere, and the hygiene, there's no hygiene. There's there's no, it's dirty. It's not clean. You can't drink the water. There's no, there's sewage place. And I just listened to him and I thought, he's right. You can't drink the water. It's, there's no personal hygiene. But when I was there, I saw all that. But what I really saw beyond that was these unbelievable mountain peaks and the sheer beauty of the landscape and the people, as poor as they were, not to, I don't know what the word is, fantasize about it. Not that they're happy because they're poor, but just there was so much beauty. And he hadn't seen that, and I just thought, well, isn't that interesting that people can be the same place and the same, but yet have vastly different experiences. So one thing is the gratitude, and I'm also, it's also talked about in the story in the book. You can't help but notice the privilege. I experienced because of the color of my skin, which I don't think about. I'm thinking more and more about today, but I don't. At that time, I certainly did not think about every day in the United States in the mid '80s, and just the privilege. And with privilege, I always think comes a tremendous responsibility. Tremendous. It's very humbling. So I would say gratitude and just a patience. Oh my gosh, patience. Patience. Things are not happening on the time frame they do here, which on the other hand is incredibly a relief. The rhythm of life.
Like refreshing on some level.
It is. I treasure a slower rhythm in life, which I find I really have to work hard to have that in my present world. Just from even 10, 20 years ago, it's vastly different. And that's just that pace, a slower pace works better for me in terms of absorbing, reflecting, and synthesizing things in my brain. My brain's really fast and sharp, but it's kind of on a different operating system.
It's a great way to explain it, right?
I think it's kind of ironic too. I think it's kind of ironic too as well, Sylvia, that you said, we almost have to work now to slow things down. It's kind of ironic we have to work to get things slow now because, the world around us is moving very fast.
Yeah, actually, I require, for me at least, I have to be extremely vigilant. I always say it's like a garden. If I don't attend to it, I have a garden full of weeds. If I don't tend to my life, I have a life full of constant interruptions, which do not nurture creativity.
So absolutely. And so I wanted to ask you as well, Sylvia, first of all, yes. So at least you might be wondering what Sylvia was talking about as far as the book. And so she is indeed in the next edition of the bLU Talks book series. And so we've been plugging that the last couple of days, talking about it a bit. And as we get closer to the end of the week, we'll be talking about it more. We kind of build up a little bit there. But that's what she's referring to for those listening. As far as her chapter coming out in the book, I'm really excited to read the story myself. We got it, and I went through it. And then, now we're getting it ready for the editors. So I'm excited to hold. I'm always excited to hold the book in my hand and read the final story. Just read it when it's fully done, captured like this, in the actual book form. And so I'm super stoked for that. But I wanted to ask you as well, for those that want to get your book that we've been talking about a lot today, even without saying the title over and over, we've been talking about it and the core message in it. Where can people get that? And is that the same hub you would send to people that want to learn more about you and connect with you further? So really, it's just where can people connect with you, learn more, grab the book, all that kind of good stuff.
Well, in terms of grabbing the book, you can grab it anywhere. The huge distributor we all know about, or your favorite bookstore down the street. So it's widely available. You can also go to its personal own website, and it's just 2 breaths, like breathing, 2 breaths, 1 step.com. And if you go on there, you'll see a selection of photos also. There's a selection of paintings in the book. You can order it right there off that page if you want. Makes no difference, whatever's easiest for you. People can always reach me on that website. They can reach me personally. Just shoot me an email, Sylvia Verange @yahoo.com. And I think that answers your questions.
It does for sure. I just want to ask for the website to make sure I put it in right because I want to put it in the comments. It's 2 steps, 1 breath. But is it .com? Is it the spelled out, like 2 spelled out and 1 spelled out, or the?
Oh yeah, yes it is. 2 spelled out, and unlike the printed book, there is no comma after 2 breaths. It's just 2 breaths, 1 step.com.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. I just wanted to make sure because I want to put it in the, like I say, in the comments here. So Elise, you were really, in a lot of ways, the cheerleader for this, and you've been steering most of the conversation. So I don't want to.
Well, I would totally go on a hike with you through Italy again, or somewhere else where we can eat our way through, like wherever the area is.
Yeah, let's go.
I would love to. Like one of my favorite things to do is to meet families in different, locations and be invited, especially RVing. My fiance and I RV'd for almost 1.5 years. We worked remotely. I coached remotely and was running the Flip Your Script platform and doing a lot of other events. And we met people on our journey. We only had 2 bicycles on the back. They weren't e-bikes at the time. And we had a 24-foot motor coach. And we would meet people at Franklin Hot Springs or wherever we were. And we'd be invited to come and either stay in their driveway or in their cul-de-sac. And it was so beautiful because we got to be in their home. And we called it kitchen takeovers. I'm a chef, so I have a culinary background. And we'd go in and we'd do that like breakfast takeover or take over the kitchen and just make meals and have everybody come together. And I love that, or have them cook for us, their signature dishes or their traditional Sunday meals. And
well,
there's something so freeing.
I can see why everybody loved having you over there.
Right? I'm like, it doesn't matter, whatever you have in your cupboards, just I'll make something.
That's great. When are you showing up?
You know what? I'm serious. I'll be there, girl. My son's actually out in California. Well, he's out in Oregon now. He has a Pleasure Way RV, and he started his journey during COVID. And he's been out in San Diego area and is making his way up with his girlfriend to Oregon and Washington. And he'll be coming back down into South Dakota. I think he's doing a sugar beet harvest. But so he's experiencing the beauty of your coast right now.
Yeah, well, there's certainly a lot here in the United States that we could experience the last 1.5 years. I mean, that trip to Italy, I must admit, I had great fun eating lots of tiramisu.
I'm sure. Yes, one of my favorite things is taking the back roads to wherever I'm going. Just take the back roads because you never know what you find. No, beautiful little nuggets, that people don't see when you take the highway or the thruway or the parkway.
Yeah, and you really hit that on the head. It's wonderful to do whatever people where you're doing what they do. I mean, I really try and travel pretty much under the radar. I mean, it's obvious you're an American. You can't really, well, it's obvious I am. You can't really get around that. But I keep a very low profile. I mean, I'm very conservative dressing. I just want to blend in. I just wanted, and I want to do the things the locals do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That's what makes it so fun.
I know. I just met some oyster. I'm in Maine right now, actually, and I just met some local oyster farmers. There's the whole oyster farming initiative to save the marine life, and I happened to be at a local brewery, one of my favorite things to do, and they had this like shuck wagon and they were shucking oysters. And I met the owner of the program, but also the owner of the oyster farm whose oysters I was indulging and in loving. And so I was invited now to go out on their boat.
Fantastic.
And take a day trip out and just experience, their whole, what do they do in their day in their life, and their charter that they normally do. But I was invited, and those are the kind of things that I think make an impact, and they make the world sweeter. When we get to meet and interact with people, we recognize that this world globally is full of the most amazing beings. Kind, loving, caring, and giving. And the little 1% that we get to see or that we get fed on a daily basis is really the minority.
Yeah. And we have, the great saints say we have so much in common, so much more in common than we have differences. It's really being able to see that, I think, that Well, it's actually very peaceful to come to that place.
And having experiences is really the one thing that changes people's lives, is having a one-on-one experience. And that's the beauty of having really Manatee Landing Retreat, the retreat that we started in the middle of the pandemic, is that we are creating a destination for people to come and have experiences and meet new people in a climate-friendly environment, because we're very outside and the suites are private. Just make a note of that. But it's life-changing, because there's different cultures, right, and different backgrounds and different reasons why people show up. But when you have these meetings and the family kids meet each other and they form these little groups and they make memories that last a lifetime, that's how we're going to change the world.
Right. That's right.
One interaction at a time. And the fact that you're going out in the world and creating that and sharing that is a gift.
Yeah, that's why I really support people traveling. And it could just be, an hour from your house. I mean, it doesn't have to be to the other side of the world. It just has to be some place that gets you out of your routine. At least that's what it is for me.
Yes. And my friends joke with me. They say, you know what, Elise, you could go to like a Publix or a 7 or a Wawa and have a road trip, right? Like that to me is, who knows who I'm going to meet in line or at the gas pump, or, walking into the store, waiting for whatever. Like everything is an adventure if you just go into it that way.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you don't have to hike the Himalayas. Just read her book.
No, you definitely don't have to. You can just go to your, take a road you haven't taken before.
Right. And read your book and see it through your eyes, have that experience through your eyes.
Well, it's been wonderful to get to share that with people. And I love hearing the comments of people and hearing what it triggers in them. So often it triggers some memory that might, they might not have been to this place at all, but just, something in their childhood they remember or something. And I do flash back to some threads of my own childhood that came up in that journey, just for whatever reason, because of my experiences. But like I said, there's many themes woven through the book. So there's a lot of different avenues that someone could approach and enter.
Yeah, and it might inspire them to take their own journey.
Yes.
Which would be, sweet.
Yeah.
All right, Corey, I know we've gone over, right?
No, it's all good. This has been magical. So I'm super stoked. And I had ordered a copy of the book, and it's on my shelf, like my bookshelf over here, that I have to read it myself as well to live vicariously through you. So I'm excited about that, because we have hiking boots, but I'm also okay with sitting with my feet up and reading the book and living your.
You could read the book with your boots on.
or go to the Publix with the book and read it sitting there at the food area they have in some of the Publix, and then you're double dipping, right? You're actually going and having the adventure while reading about the adventure.
There you go.
Where it's with you wherever you go, and it becomes its own adventure.
And you'll probably have a more satisfying meal for yourself.
Absolutely.
100%. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure. I knew it would be. I thank you so much. I appreciate you. I salute you. I honor you. We're going to wave the flag for you in a big way with the upcoming Blue Talks book. But thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Elise, for being here with me. I think I'm going to do the sign up for everybody at the same time, if that's cool, Elise.
Absolutely. I've got 10 minutes, so I'm good.
Okay, this has been so much fun.
We loved having you.
We're going to stay in touch, because I'm interested and inspired to do a little Italian trip.
That sounds great. This has been so much fun to be with you two today. Thank you.
Well, we loved it, and we always call it a to be continued, because our guests are so magical. We want to make sure we give them an opportunity if they want to be with us in the future. And also, Elise does Flip Your Script Friday. She's been on a break, but I think she's coming back. And so she picks up great guests for that show too. So I'll let you guys connect on that going forward to see if there's a fit there.
Yes, I'll reach out as soon as we start up again. And it might be the new year. I think that would be a good time to start at the beginning of the year. We'll start with our Flip Your Script Fridays again. So
that sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
I look forward to that.
Definitely.
Amazing. Well, thank you both again so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. We appreciate you always. And we'll be back again same time tomorrow with a couple of new amazing guests as well. But thank you again so much on behalf of myself and Elise. Thank you for joining us, Sylvia. Thank you, everybody. Have a magical day. And
thank you.
Thank you.